Welcome to New York Bio's Virtual Breakfast Series, a digital program started in 2020 bringing you fireside chats with leaders across the healthcare spectrum. This week's episode features Rachel Butler, president of the Catalytic Impact Foundation, and Richard Lipkin, co-founder, co-chair, and co-manager of the investment committee of the Catalytic Impact Foundation.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jennifer Hawks-Bland, and I'm the CEO at New York Bio. We are very excited you're joining us for another edition of our virtual breakfast series. We are joined by Rick Lipkin and Rachel Butler from the Catalytic Impact Foundation today, and we're going to talk all things investing, early stage companies, philanthropic investing. But before that, I wanted to flag for everyone a New York Bio event that I hope that you will plan to attend. If you are in Manhattan on Sunday, February 5th, which is the day before the Bio CEO and Investor Conference kicks off, New York Bio is hosting the welcome reception. So if you are around and you can join us, please register on our website at newyorkbio.org. And with that, let's get into our first of our 2023 conversations. Derek, over to you.
All right. Well, happy start to 2023. And we are kicking off 2023 with some of my favorite things. So Rick and Rachel, I know both of you well. I think extremely highly of both of you, and that's point one. And I also love it when we get to talk about early stage company creation, new venture models, and all sorts of things associated with New York. And you have wrapped all of that up into one thing. So as we get going, why don't each of you give us a little bit of a background story, tell us kind of where you came from and how you met, and then we will actually get into the origin of CIF. And also, we already have an insider question coming from the gallery pool, so this is going to be fun today.
Well, why don't I start? First of all, thank you very much for having us, Jennifer and Derek. This is great. So my background actually did not start out in healthcare or science. I actually have pretty much of an entrepreneurial background. I have been involved in building businesses right out of college and throughout really the next 25 years. I have launched, built, and sold 2 companies, and the second one was actually in the healthcare space. So it actually started with a personal story in that I have 4 children, but my second son had quite severe asthma and allergies, both respiratory and food allergies as a child. And really, the asthma was a huge issue. And we found that despite having the education, the resources, the access to very good doctors and healthcare, we were not being successful keeping him out of the hospital. And really, with so many chronic illnesses, it's really about education. It's about disease self-management. And so from our experience, I ended up launching something called Asthma Magazine. It's a patient education publication that really focused on helping both families and actually ended up being used in a lot of doctors' offices and with clinicians aiding patient education there. And so built that into a fairly widely read publication. We had a collaboration with the American Lung Association, collaboration with the American Academy of Allergy, Asthma, and Immunology. We ended up providing all of the patient education material for Merck's launch of their first-in-class drug Singulair. We were part of the largest children's asthma study in the country. So it was really very heartening, I think, to see that we could also really provide information to sort of the underserved communities. We did materials in low reading level. We translated into Spanish. So really focused on trying to help people access unbiased information that could help them, really take care of their condition or their child's. Eventually, we sold to Elsevier Health Sciences, where they were looking to get into direct consumer. They are one of the largest publications of medical journals, as probably everyone knows. And I stayed on there as editor-in-chief for another 5 years. From there, I had the healthcare bug. It's always been a passion of mine, but I just really loved working in the space. So I joined an organization called Cavendish Global, where I was head of the Family Office and Investor Relations. And it's an organization that would host conferences to bring together investors with early stage companies focused in life sciences and healthcare. During that time, I met Rick and was sort of peripherally involved in the early launch of the Catalytic Impact Foundation, and then came over full-time to that in about 5 years ago. So 2018, early 2018. And haven't looked back. So it's been a really wonderful way actually to combine two things that I am so passionate about, which is first, really the startup community, building businesses, entrepreneurship, and combining that with, health innovation, which I think is just such an incredibly important area that is often overlooked when people talk about the impact space. So I'll, from there, hand over to Rick.
Hey, thank you, Rachel. First of all, Derek and Jennifer, thank you for having us, because I am such a fan of the New York Bio community. You've just built a fabulous community. The story of my, origin story is very nonlinear. I have lived an extremely nonlinear life, and I've sort of looked at my professional evolution as, I call it, a career weave, or even a career braid. Exactly, a three-stranded braid. I'm sort of like a cat that's had 9 lives, with 8 of them being in parallel. The 3 strands of that braid are an academic life, a business life, and a philanthropic life. My academic life, I was an undergraduate at Princeton University, and then went on to Columbia, where I studied both business and neuroscience, cognitive neuroscience, and went on and developed a real passion in the area of computational neuroscience, which is something that I continue today, and have an ongoing relationship with a wonderful laboratory at Columbia. In my business life, I started in the 1990s with a real interest in early stage companies. And I was involved with a whole bunch of them, and mostly in the beginning, technology companies. But that led me to Columbia Business School, where I evolved into a series of partnerships that ultimately led to Easton Capital Investment Group, which is where I've been for the last really 10 to 15 years. It's a wonderful shop led by John Friedman, who was a partner of Warburg Pincus and spun out this wonderful New York-based life sciences healthcare organization. And the third strand is what I call my philanthropic life, which really means me donating my time and energy and resources to a whole bunch of wonderful not-for-profit organizations. One of which is this thing above my left shoulder here, this CIF, the Catalytic Impact Foundation, which Rachel and I and our team launched together. I was really, the prime mover that sort of pushed it all into existence back in 2015, 2016 to get it going, and then had the pleasure and the privilege of having Rachel join. And together we've been growing and building this for the last 5 years, and it's been a wonderful experience. And happy to share more about CIF's independent origin.
Well, why don't we do that then? How about we transition to see where CIF came from? Because as you guys know, New York has been in this upswing of both innovation, capitalism, entrepreneurship, et cetera. And I think we've seen the emergence of, a number of traditional venture capital funds that are working in the area, but you guys have both a different spin on seed and early stage capital. You've pulled together this amazing team, and as you can imagine, I think the ecosystem welcomes any new outlet for how to move the innovative ball forward in healthcare. So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you guys basically got together and put this organization together?
Yeah. Maybe let me start with the actual idea that really led to this, which is I think it's a story that we all understand for those of us who are part of the New York Bio community. I remember, about 15 years ago, being at a presentation, and I'm sort of in a conference room on the 20th floor of a big glass building on 3rd Avenue. And there's a whole bunch of VCs in the room, and in walks this unbelievable team. You've got 5 people from Harvard Medical School, MD, PhDs, Howard Hughes scholars, and the whole 9 yards. And they tell us, we've spent 10 years of our lives and $20 million of federal funding, and we finally have it. Everyone says, what's it? They say, we can actually cure or at least arrest the development of a rare childhood illness. And everyone goes, that's amazing. How many children suffer from this? They'd say, well, there's about 2,000 kids diagnosed per year, and most of them die by the age of 8. And so, all the VCs in the room, they kind of, they sort of fiddle with their phones and they make notes and look at their watches and they leave. And I'm the last one in the room. And I was so angry. I was so outraged by this. And I understand, I get it. It's really difficult to fund companies that have these small target audiences. But I had this kind of sense of, gosh, these kids now are going to die year after year after year, and nobody cares and nobody's paying attention. It's not a medical problem anymore. It's not a science problem. This is a business problem. And if we don't take this on, who's going to take it on? And this gnawed at me for a while. And then I guess at one point I had this epiphanic moment where I said, gee, I wonder, how we can actually address this problem. And I kind of had this sense of, think of it as sort of the whiteboard moment, where you wipe down the whiteboard and you say, what kind of a solution could I design that actually might make a dent in this problem? And that's really what led to the creation of CIF, the Catalytic Impact Foundation. So actually, why don't I do this? Rachel, how about you? You want to talk about what CIF is, and then
we're a sort of a unique organism, I guess, in that we are a 501c3 not-for-profit organization. We our mission is to accelerate innovation in life sciences and healthcare. And we do that by bringing in donated capital. We pool it, we aggregate it, we pool it, and then we run that like a venture fund, an early stage venture fund, with the difference being that there are no limited partners. There is, it's an evergreen fund, so that money gets allocated not in grants, but in equity investments into, early stage companies that are focused on addressing a significant unmet medical need. And then when there are exits, the money goes back into the fund, gets recycled and reinvested for more impact. So actually, Rick coined the term regenerative philanthropy. So I think many people, in the philanthropic world often are frustrated or disillusioned in that, you give and you give and you give, and you often don't sort of see tangible results, but B, it seems a little bit like a black hole. So the idea that this money comes in, we, and we run this very much, as a high-end venture fund, early stage venture fund. So we are not, we have a due diligence process and, pretty, I think, high sort of a level of criteria for what merits an investment, but we give a little bit more emphasis to things that a venture fund may not be. So is it mission aligned? Is it addressing a significant need that is particularly in an underfunded area? We have 6 verticals that we've identified as being underfunded, although we'll invest broadly. But the 6 areas of focus for us is children's health, women's health, rare disease, brain health, which very much includes mental health, aging, and health equity. Health equity is actually added after, COVID, and where we really saw, I think that really laid bare some of the inequities in the way that healthcare is accessed in the United States. So we added that as an area of particular interest. So, we're very focused on impact, but we also expect to get money back. We want to invest in companies that are going to be successful, and those aren't mutually exclusive to be impactful and successful.
Yeah.
What did I miss there, Rick?
Oh, well, let me just ask a quick question.
Yeah,
So
sure.
the initial capital that comes in to CIF is done as a philanthropic donation from individuals?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it could be individuals, foundations, any source of philanthropic capital. But when someone makes a donation, they get all of the tax benefits of that. And and actually we have found that some of our more major donors are people who are in this space, who really understand the needs in health innovation and life sciences and medical, medical space.
Yeah. And I think just
so just before, just so that people don't think that this is something that's brand new, right? Like you've got 50 companies in your portfolio, right? You've been at this for a while. This is not something that's just like burst onto the scene. You've actually got your feet under you. You've got a good run rate. You've had a couple of this is not a fledgling venture here. You've actually started this.
50 investments. We've had 3 go to zero as expected. In fact, our expectation in this space in investing at this stage of development is probably a third of them will. But we've had 4 exits, a couple of them quite large. So we've got now proof of concept of the funds being regenerated and going back into the fund, and that money has already been put to work and reinvested. And we have another exit pending this spring. So
and just to flesh out why we chose this structure and a little bit about the scope. Rachel and I have really had this privilege of building this out from nothing. And we literally started with absolutely nothing. And one visionary donor said she was willing to write a $150,000 check that put us into business. And that set everything in motion. So the whole concept is, if you're running a classical for-profit GPLP fund, you're very limited in what you can do. You are working for your LPs and you're trying to maximize your IRR. And that's what's important. And the problem is that for a certain class of early stage companies, they're important, but they need more help in the beginning to sort of get rolling before and to de-risk. And that was the reason why we decided to design this as what I call pure form VC. It's a captive pool of money. No, as Rachel said, no limited partners, no investors, and no special fees to the managers either. We actually want this to be run in pure form. The money is donated to CIF. CIF runs this pool of capital. We have a partnership, for instance, with a group called Impact Assets, which is a $2 billion platform. In that partnership, we built this whole portfolio. And the whole idea is that we want to identify first and foremost unmet healthcare need, number one. Number two, valid science and medicine, stuff that is pushing the envelope and creative, but it's built on a solid foundation of peer-reviewed work. And then the third piece of the puzzle is the management team. We want to back, and sounds like a fortune cookie when you say it, but we mean it. We want to back great people to do great things. I'm a huge admirer of the MacArthur Foundation and the Skoll Foundation, some of the other foundations, to really find great teams and back them and stay with them, and to say, you've got a great history of accomplishment, let's push the envelope. And that is a guiding principle. So at this point, as Derek was saying, we have the privilege of having this wonderful organization. It's an international thing now. We have a whole community that we've built that 300 to 400 people internationally who are part of the community. We have 60 to 70 advisors. About half of them are on our website. We have a core team in New York City and Boston, also in Bay Area and Seattle, with folks in London, in Prague, in Israel, in India. And the people in this community, I feel privileged, absolutely privileged every day to interact. It's just magnificent. Everyone has self-selected. These are high-level professionals who want to do something meaningful. And who are these people? We have venture capital managers, we have hedge fund managers, private equity managers, people who've launched, built, and sold companies, pharmaceutical executives. We have family offices, foundations. We have somebody from DARPA. We have university folks, disease organizations, and it's a very, very special community. And that's part of the ethic. That's part of what we want to accomplish.
And amazingly, they all donate their time, which is just pretty incredible. So we have, all MDs, PhDs who are all just really jazzed by the mission and want to be a part of it and want to be helpful. And so it's been a great way to build kind of a brain trust around this that gives us the ability to really go deep and analyze companies and technologies, et cetera.
Yeah. So we have a question that I think that I think gets to kind of the next thing that I was going to bring up. So the question said that your origin story is about a rare disease whose cure wouldn't be profitable to fund, right? Which I don't think is actually true. It was something that would turn off traditional venture because it didn't have the same economics that they usually look for, right? So what I'll ask is, you actually are taking some risks by being different, right? You haven't built a fund that can just kind of ride the coattails of the next, wave of venture and fund different things. So what's it like trying to basically, strike off and fund things that are different? The management teams in the areas that, aren't necessarily considered as, sexy or as hot as, traditional venture capital, or like the flavor of the moment that everybody is charging into. You kind of had to blaze your own path there a little bit in order to basically break in and get companies to move. So what is that like?
Let me address that for a second, because it is often the case, as we all know, and from companies that are in the New York Bio community, there are important needs and the valid companies. It's just that the first, few years of this sort of high risk zone that the companies are in are very difficult. But once they get through that, what is often called the valley of death, these companies become attractive acquisition candidates.
Mm-hmm.
And that's sort of what happens. Typically when companies, even if they have relatively small markets, when they get up to a phase 1 or phase 2 level, or they get to a certain point, then for a large or mid-sized pharmaceutical company to acquire and absorb them, which is what happens all the time, is not so difficult.
Mm-hmm.
We actually just looked back at our first, at the end of 2022, we created an impact report, and we just looked back at all of the investments and looked to see that, in fact, half of all of the investments that we've made have been in the seed or pre-seed, period of development, and 85% have been Series A or before that, or earlier. So it was nice to see that that was the mission, that was our strategy, and that's really is what has transpired. And I would add that the other piece in addressing your question, Derek, about how do we sort of make it work going into companies that are struggling a little bit more, or potentially have more challenges getting funding. One thing that we have done is to build co-investing relationships with sort of like-minded investors. So we have relationships with other funders who are focused on children's health, who are focused on mental health. And that has been a great resource for us, both in deal flow, but also in being able to go in and, as the name suggests, being catalytic. So we go in and make an investment, but we want to be catalytic and help to bring in additional funders. And we've been quite successful in doing that, which helps a lot in getting them through that valley of death and getting to the point where they are more attractive to a broader range of investors.
Yeah, I think.
Oh, go ahead, Rick.
I was just going to say that by design, our goal is we really can't carry companies. Our goal is to get in, to put in a certain amount of strategic capital, help raise money around it, it's not uncommon for us to put in somewhere between 100,000 and 500,000 into a company, and then to have $2 million follow. And that's an important strategic moment in that company's life history. We have many examples of that.
So that actually is a good question. We had a question from the audience. You said it's not unusual, but the question is, what is your typical investment, right? Over your 50 investments, do you have a typical sort of size, or does it depend on where the company is?
Well, it's limited also by our capital base.
Yeah.
So as we grow in our capital base, I think we'll be able to do more, but we don't really want to be large investors. The goal is, right now we're starting in that 1 to 500 zone. And at the moment, that's where we're capping it. And that's worked quite well. In the future, it may be the case that we can, start with 250 and maybe notch it up to $1 million. But I don't really think that we're ever going to try to be large investors in companies. That's not the point. The point is to rally the troops, and if we lead with $1 million, let's get 5 million or 10 million surrounding us, and then set something up to be successful with larger pool of capital.
Can we shift just slightly here? I noticed on your website when we were preparing for our conversation today that you launched a separate children's health fund. Can you talk to us about the why and what you plan to do with that fund specifically?
Yeah, so just this past summer, we launched the CIF's Children's Health Fund. We already had a strong focus in children's health, but we really, that really is so much at the core of our being is children's health and how important that is. And our model works very well for that, given that, as Rick referenced, small patient populations, which in the early stage does make it more difficult to raise money. So we actually had a large donor who funded the launch of that. And although we will focus broadly within children's health, there is a particular focus on pediatric cancer and youth mental health. So, pediatric cancer is the second leading cause of death by disease in children. Mental health, I think everyone has seen just the skyrocketing issues around that and incidents. Suicide has rapidly risen. It's now, I think, the leading cause of death, or second leading behind accidents, cause of death in youth. So these are two areas that we think are just hugely important, where that will be the primary focus. Yeah.
So we've been through this amazing period of, I will say just capital availability, right? We went through this period of, the standard $100 million A round. And I think we've now gone through kind of a market dip, and now we are very much not that, right? So we have the SPAC craze, we have all of those things. And, CIF has kind of been through that entire cycle. So I would say, what was it like both in the middle of that cycle where, valuations kind of went through the roof, and, what are things like for you now? Because you never really, I don't think, explored either extreme of that piece of the marketplace.
Well, there's sort of two different ways of looking at this. On the one hand, we, like any other VC organization, adapt to the conditions that we are presented with. I tend to go for sailing metaphors because I tend to think that way. And the reality is, conditions change. And at the moment, let's put it this way, when the markets are roaring and everything's flying and getting expensive, that's a harder time to put money to work. At the same time, there's need there too. I see, the investment community, there's a sort of a lemming-like quality. You get this bandwagon effect where, the big money sort of follows each other and pools together around a small number of companies. And, there's always a lot of companies out there that are worthy of investment, even when the big money is flying and they're not getting what they are due. And so, we need to navigate those conditions. But, like any other, we historically now, I mean, we look at well over 1,000 companies a year. And we invest in 1%. We can only do 10 or 12 companies a year. That's what we're capable of doing at this moment in our history. So we're just scraping the snow off the top of the iceberg, so to speak.
That's not a sailing analogy.
Yeah, mixing my metaphors here. Yeah.
Well, it is if you're a really unfortunate sailor, right? I mean,
Yeah, let's hope it's not.
I don't know
Way
that,
off course.
I don't know that there are that many sailors that can empathize with that. But if you've been sailing and scraped the snow off the top of an iceberg, you can be our guest next week. I'd really like to hear that story.
I think just to add to that too, I mean, we're very cognizant now that, we really need to work hard when we make an investment to help bring in additional capital, because it is even harder now, especially for these earlier stage companies, to, get the capital that they need to get to the next stage. So, actually we've been pretty pleased in our portfolio as a whole that so far, none that we're aware of have had to do down rounds. Generally they seem pretty healthy. I think that there definitely is going, we expect that there will be challenges there in this different, sort of new environment where funding is more challenging to secure.
Do you find yourself in the conversation to kind of lead the next round of funding? How does that usually work if you've seeded a company? Do they look to you to lead a round? Do you lead rounds like that? How does that work from your side?
I think our goal, honestly, is to be of service to the companies. And sometimes, it depends on the role that we are being asked to play and that we are capable of playing. Mm-hmm. So we do the best we can to interact with, management teams when doing so is helpful to them. Sometimes that means we become actively involved with the board and actively go out and help raise money. And other times we lean back instead of leaning in, if that's the appropriate thing to do. The goal is just to be of service and help and get the best results. I mean, one thing too, I just point out, by the way, is conditions change, as the economy ebbs and flows, so to speak. I think we're in this coming year, I'm anticipating this is going to be a consolidation period where you're going to see a lot of mergers and acquisitions. Large pharma and mid-sized pharma will tend to have more money and will tend to go out looking to acquire and to do deals with companies. And I think that there's going to be a higher percentage of money flowing in from those channels. Mm-hmm. And well, after that, 2024, who knows?
We just had a great question from Lou DeGeneiro. Can you talk about your interactions with other nonprofit funders? And are you syndicating deals? And are you open to seeing opportunities from other nonprofits as you collaborate?
Absolutely. We are in the collaboration business. The whole point of CIF is to have a community of collaborators. And we work on this all the time. We want co-investors, we want partners, absolutely. And Lou is wonderful. I remember Rachel and I had the privilege of meeting with Lou some time ago before the pandemic. And what he and his organization are doing is absolutely phenomenal.
We collect pennies for patients. I don't know if they used to do that. We did that in elementary school all the time. So one other thing that I think is unique that I want you to spend some time talking about is you have a huge roster of advisors on all sorts of different topics that you consider important throughout your investing process, as well as I think the way you just operate. Can you talk to us about how you develop that and what you look for in an advisor and what makes it a sweet spot for them to engage with you?
Yeah, I think it's been a very organic growth process. I mean, our goal as mentioned, is to build community. We want to have a community of serious, like-minded professionals and diverse professionals who feel called to do this kind of work and want to participate. And we find that CIF has become a magnet for some amazing people. And I think just, you know, the issue is if you've been in this industry and you care about unmet need and you feel that there's a place for yourself in the kind of community we're building, we look to find ways to work together. I mean, nothing would make me happier than to have a community of people also where people, they gravitate to CIF, they meet each other, they thrive, they, you know, grow as professionals and feel good about what they're doing. Very much in Jennifer and Derek, the way you guys have tried to create New York Bio. It's a similar feeling.
And I would just add that we have probably a group of about 12 advisors who are really very involved. You know, some of them putting in 10, 15 hours a week, very involved in going out and sort of hunting and looking for companies that may fit well into what we're looking to, you know, being mission aligned and what we're looking to support. They also very involved in our due diligence process, which is an amazing thing because, you know, as I said, we have MDs, we have PhDs, we have people who have, you know, venture and private equity backgrounds, healthcare investing backgrounds. So, you know, we couldn't, you know, really buy these people's times. We couldn't afford to, and yet they give it to us for free. And I think really the motivation for many is that there is a great sense of purpose and being able to feel like you're making a real difference. And, you know, I bore my family often in the evenings when you cannot believe this amazing CEO we talked to today. Oh my God, what they're doing. And, you know, and they're like, yeah. But it's fascinating, you know, and it's really just such incredibly impactful work. And we often look at, you know, where people talk about impact investing and they, you know, it's climate and, you know, global health, which is obviously also part of what we do, but so many, you know, education, which are all incredibly important. But I think sometimes healthcare is overlooked because innovation in healthcare, I mean, if, you know, an old adage, if you don't have your health, you have nothing. And I think if you talk to a parent of a child who has a devastating illness, you will see that there is nothing more impactful than helping to create a therapeutic or a better diagnostic for something that will change either the quality of life for someone or, you know, or save a life. And we, you know, feel like we're doing that every day in some way or another. So it's great. You know, it's a wonderful environment to work in, and we feel really privileged and lucky to have so many people who want to be involved.
Yeah, and it's a little bit of a shout out to our wonderful core team. You know, in addition to myself and Rachel, we are privileged. We have Rob Wolk and David Danar, Ellen Itzkovitz, John Luff, you know, Michael Poss, some wonderful people with just bringing incredible backgrounds to this work, and some wonderful advice from Derek as well, who's been
one of our team members who are part of the investment team, Susanna Frazio Pinheiro, she's based in London, but she does the due diligence for healthcare for the European Union Investment Fund. You know, so just really incredibly high caliber people that we're lucky to have as part of this.
So Rob actually asked a question early on, and I think it'd be good to highlight this. So I know you don't want to talk about any of your individual companies, so I'm going to turn around his question a little bit. His question was, you know, can you talk about one or two of the most innovative companies that you invested in? And the twist that I'll put on it is, can you talk a little bit about kind of what they do and then the process behind which you invested? Like, where did the deal come from? What was the discussion like, and how did you kind of get to consensus on, you know, yeah, this is something we're going to pull the trigger on and something we're going to do?
I can talk about a couple of companies that are sort of in the same space that I found, you know, and Rick may have others that he wants to highlight. But, you know, as we talked about, mental health is an incredibly important area right now, in that I think 1 out of 3 youth now have a diagnosed mental health condition. And if you look at sort of the history of the development of therapeutics in this space, many of them have been around for a very long time, and many of them sort of were developed in a kind of happenstance way, that they recognized with the drug that it had this effect. They don't really understand why or how, but it's been working for a number of years, and therefore it's being used. Doesn't work for everyone. There's no real way to identify who's going to benefit and who's not, and they often don't really understand the mechanism of action. So there are a couple of companies that we've invested in that are doing different types of brain imaging and looking at how a drug or molecule affects certain parts of the brain. And because of the development of more sophisticated brain imaging, this is sort of a new area of science and has huge potential for both developing new therapeutics as well as being able to target therapeutics better for an individual patient. And I think probably anyone who knows people who are suffering from serious mental health conditions knows that there is a sort of trial and error process that can go for weeks, months, years, often unsuccessfully, to try and find a drug that works for that person and doesn't have side effects that makes them want to stop taking it. So, and often with terrible outcomes, because, when you are seriously ill and you're going for months or years trying to find something that works for you, there can be, really terrible consequences to that. So those are, and we have invested in 2 companies that are going at this in a different way, both in targeting therapeutics for individuals, but also in being able to better develop therapeutics in this space. So that's an area that I'm really excited about, and think that there's, we're just sort of at a jumping off point right now where there's just huge potential to develop better treatments for people who suffer from mental illness.
Yeah, I would even add to that, that in terms of stage, by the way, we have gone in on many stages of companies. Sometimes companies are robust and well-developed, but in a number of cases, we've gotten involved even before the company existed, just getting to know and working with the founding team. And, in the extending what Rachel just said, I can think of a specific case of a wonderful team up at Harvard Medical School that, we got to know them before they had a company. And out of that emerged a wonderful brain imaging company that we seeded it with funding. We helped lead the round. We serve on the board. And there are plenty of other stories like that as well.
So we actually had a couple of questions about still about the foundation and how you how you both evaluate, and then a question about, I'm going to combine one, a question about, would you ever consider investing in a health tech fund? And then the same person also asked a question about the types of contributions that you take to the CIF fund, and do you only do in donations, or do you look at other types of loans or equity, or just donations? I'm assuming it's the latter if you're a C3, but
yeah. Let me just speak. So first of all, we do not invest in other funds. We aggregate philanthropic money and we invest directly in companies. And that's our mandate, number one. We generally, let me say, we do not make grants. I love grants. I think grants are fantastic. That's not what we do. We are investing in companies because we want to advance translation. And if there's a success, we want to get the money back. It's an evergreen fund. We've already done this 4 times. We had 4 exits with profit. The money went right back into the fund and goes out the door again. And in terms of the type of investing we do, it's, mostly we go into safes and convertible notes and equity. We're not doing anything terribly complex and don't really think we have to. So yeah, I think that gets to the essence of it.
we're scrolling. We've got lots of
Yeah,
questions.
we're scrolling.
today.
We have lots. So there was one piece here, and what we can get to, in thinking about the Children's Health Fund, right? Where was one of the questions on priority review vouchers, right? So, that is, it's something that, you have an asset that's created. It's ostensibly valuable because you could sell them. When you think about something like a Children's Health Fund, does that kind of vehicle work its way into your discussion as something that is a positive for it? Is it something that's kind of ancillary, you deal with it as it comes, or is it something that actually goes into your calculations of things? Because it's something that's created, but it's kind of like sidecar tangential to what you're really trying to do.
Well, I think for one thing, it does obviously factor in because, as we said, we're not doing grants. We are looking to find companies that will be successful and looking to have funds returned to be reused and reinvested. So it certainly goes into our thinking. It also, I think, is helpful in knowing that it can help bring in additional capital, because as Rick said, we are not able to carry a company. So we're looking to invest where, and sometimes it's a lot of work on our part to help bring in additional, but also we want to know that the company will be, investable by other larger entities. So it definitely would factor into our thinking. But again, our main focus is, is there an unmet need? What is the scientific basis of this technology, and what does the team look like? And is this the team that is, a talented team, experienced team who can take this, take this over the finish line, whatever that line may be, whether it's acquisition, whether it's full development of the technology. So, and one thing we actually haven't talked about, but in looking at the team, we have actually a focus on not just companies that are, in a space that is underfunded, but also CEOs and leaders who are underfunded. So we have a sort of, as part of our mission, is to invest in leaders that are diverse. And we started off really with a primary focus on investing in women leaders. We started small, and we now actually, just with our most recent investment, we have hit 50% of our companies are led by women. And, that I often say that's been a sort of a classic case of doing well by doing good, because some of our best companies are led by these incredible women. And often it's helped with deal flow, because we tell people this and they're like, oh my God, I have to introduce you to this amazing woman doing this incredible work. And so it's really helped, I think, helped sort of bring into the flow some really, top level companies. I think also, women often, and other sort of diverse leaders who don't tend to get as much funding. I think nationally, 3% or less of venture capital goes to women-led companies. So in a way, women have to kind of work a little harder and accomplish a little more to get to the point of getting this investment. And, we could debate that, that, and I'm not saying that they're better than the men who run the companies, for sure. Certainly they aren't. But, we have found that it's been great for just finding really competent, really driven management teams. So it's been very helpful. And then 45% of our companies are led by persons of color. We have one company led by a person of disability who's in a wheelchair. So we have found it actually good business practice to really broaden our view, and to be sure to meet with and give our time and attention to leaders who don't look typically like what many venture firms look for.
Yep. Well, before we move on, I think that's fantastic. If you think about, you're well above the averages in backing women. You're certainly above the averages in backing people of color, and we need more of that. right? That's fantastic all around. We had a good question about kind of digital investments, and I'll ask this in a way that spreads things out. So if you invest in digital health or things like tech bio or anything like that, do you find yourself getting a little spread out from either a technology perspective or a market perspective? Is it getting easier to be broader, right? Do you feel comfortable kind of going across a very wide range of technologies rather than being hyper focused?
I think the way we do that, the answer is yes. And I think we do it by reverse engineering, beginning with the unmet need, then looking at the method, the science, technology, whatever it is that's being brought to bear. And then finally, as mentioned earlier, the team, which is the backbone of the whole enterprise. We back people to do things. We're not backing stuff. So I say this because we're seeing an increasing level of, interesting digital applications. And I think a lot of it is honestly the larger arc is the precision medicine arc. This confluence in the last 5 to 10 years that's only expanding, that integrates high-end computing plus genetic information plus really good molecular biology and sophisticated chemistry driven by technology. And this is the back end and backbone of a lot of our companies, but also this has, I think, increased the value proposition in many digital health companies.
Yep.
We actually have also another sort of a do you question from the audience is, and I know you mentioned you have an advisor who is in Europe, but the question is, do you invest in European companies?
Yeah. In principle, we can invest anywhere on earth. I think in practice, there's so much happening in the United States that a lot of our, attention gets gravitationally pulled here. But we do have companies.
We have one company that's based in the UK. We have another based in Israel.
Yeah.
Actually, two really.
And India. Yeah. So we embrace international investing. And I hope that as we grow in terms of our resources, in terms of our asset and the extent of our community, we can do more. I want to be more international, not less.
Yeah. And then we have, not surprisingly, people are inspired to engage, and they want to know if someone in our audience or in the New York Bio community would like to talk to you about potentially becoming an advisor or impacting the work that you're doing. How do they reach you?
Sure. Well, best way to reach us is just you can look at our website, which is cifimpact.org. I think the website tells our story better than we do. And our contact information is there. And it's pretty simple. Our first letter of our first names and last name at cifimpact.org is the convention. So it's easy to reach Rachel, myself, and our team members. We've got a whole team. So we embrace the outreach to the best of our ability.
Okay, so we started with, as you're telling the story, we started with the onus on, thinking about, hey, this is a completely underfunded area. I'm angry that this stuff isn't going to get funded. So let's create a vehicle to fund it. Where do you see, this fund, going from here, right? You have kind of the ability to evolve. You started another fund for children's health. What are the next steps in what the fund does look like?
Yeah, I think Rachel and I and our team, we all share a vision, and there is a big grand vision, which I hope that I guess it probably sounds kind of grandiose, but it really is where we're aiming. It's our North Star. So imagine the following. Imagine that you could take the MacArthur Foundation or something, an organization of that quality and vision, and you integrate it with, say, the Aspen Institute, which is like a global intelligence network, and you bolt onto it a leading venture fund, something like Deerfield or Flagship Pioneering or Arch, and you have $1 billion of permanent capital. And that money can be invested 100% in healthcare innovation and impact. That is really the big vision that we're sort of arcing toward. And I know that from where we're standing, I always say that it's like I can see the top of the mountain from the parking lot of the ski slope. We're still putting on our skis and boots down at the bottom, but I can see the lodge up at the top of the gondola. And that is really, my hope is that 20 years from now, that exists. And we can actually change the landscape of healthcare innovation in this country and really make a difference.
And it's really designed to be to once we get to a certain point, it will become self-sustaining. If you have a certain number of companies that, have exits and the money goes back in, at some point it becomes self-sustaining and no longer relying on, we're still at the point where we rely on donations, but that is the hope, that it becomes something where in perpetuity it will exist to fund early stage companies doing really important work in unmet medical need.
I guess the analogy there is at that point you're riding the ski lift. Maybe right now you're putting the skins on your skis and hiking up the mountain. So we've only got literally like less than 3 minutes left. So I'd like to close this out with how do you see, because we're New York Bio, how do you see the New York ecosystem contributing and impacting the work that you're doing at CIF?
We embrace fellow travelers. We spend our time trying to build coalitions, relationships. If people who feel called to this, we're just trying to build a network of relationships to build this out. So, of course, capital helps. So that's a big help. And individuals who are co-investors, people who have expertise in things, people who share this vision and want to be part of the journey and the community.
Rachel?
I would ditto what Rick said. And I guess I would say too, that we've spent a lot of time building the foundation. And, we have 50 companies, we have shown sort of proof of concept. And now we're really in the sort of phase of scaling this. So, so that means we are looking for donors, we are looking for more advisors, we are looking for people who want to, be involved in this, whatever their skill sets are. We welcome, as Rick said, we're in the business of collaboration and community, and so and
corporate partners too, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Someone asked earlier about working with other foundations, and we have been speaking with a number of pediatric cancer foundations and other children's health foundations. I think there's lots of opportunity there, to pool resources and to really move the needle in that space.
Yeah, and large visionary philanthropic organizations that want to collaborate. I always say that what we're trying to do is figure out how to make 1 + 1 = 3. How partnerships liberate value that wasn't there before.
Well, that's certainly
also Rick gave the cifimpact.org is the website, but there's also, we recently posted our 2022 impact report, which is on just the front page of that, which you can download, which I think gives a nice sort of summary of where we are, what we've done, and where we're headed.
Yeah, we put it in the chat earlier. Yeah.
Oh, perfect.
Yes. Thank you so much for participating today. We certainly value you individually, but certainly CIF as part of our New York community, and we're thankful that you're here and doing what you do each day. We hope that everyone has a great week. We'll see you back next Tuesday, and don't forget to register for our Bio CEO welcome reception if you'll be in New York on the 5th of February. Everyone have a great day.
Great. Night, everybody.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Looking forward.